Clara's sole desire was to return home and relax after her prenatal appointment. But her day took a distressing turn when she was suddenly confronted by 7 bikers. In response, she made a phone call that visibly unnerved them. What unfolded next is truly astonishing. That day, Clara was focused on one thing: getting home to rest. She was returning from the hospital after her prenatal session, which was as exhausting as usual. Having spent much of the session on her feet and being heavily pregnant, she was eager to relax and relieve her aching legs. Fortunately, the hospital was only a short walk from her home, so she anticipated being back shortly. Unexpectedly, as she strolled slowly home, the disturbing sound of motorcycle engines roaring caught her attention. Fearfully, she turned around and was horrified to see 7 bikers racing towards her at high speeds. Overcome with terror, Clara screamed and, dropping her bag, started to run. Unable to leap across a ditch due to her pregnancy, she hurried forward, crossed over the curb, and narrowly dodged out of the way as the bikers zoomed by. They cackled loudly, evidently amused by the fear they had instilled in her as they sped away recklessly. Clara was furious, unable to comprehend how adults could engage in such reckless driving, especially in a child-populated area. The risk to her safety and that of her unborn baby was appalling. Adding to her anger was the fact that she wasn't even on the road. She was on the pedestrian lane when a biker swerved dangerously close to her. Had she not moved quickly, she would have been hit. Outraged by their deliberate disregard for her life, Clara couldn't hold back her fury and yelled at them as she retrieved her dropped bag. As the bikers sped off, she shouted, calling them reckless and questioning their senseless behavior in a busy area. At her loud protest, one of the bikers slowed and then stopped. After a brief pause, they turned around and returned to her location, encircling her while revving their engines menacingly close. As they circled tighter, effectively trapping her, they hurled insults, demeaning her appearance and questioning her future parenting abilities. They taunted her for confronting them, suggesting she should have ignored their dangerous antics like others presumably had. Their harsh words deeply wounded Clara, but she defiantly responded to their taunts. She wasn't intimidated by them, but the possibility of harm coming to her unborn child filled her with dread. She demanded they leave her alone, especially since they were on a busy road in the middle of the day, where anyone could simply look out and observe the bikers menacing her. She hoped the potential of public scrutiny would deter them, but unfortunately, that was not the case. Instead, it seemed to spur them on even more. They mocked her loudly, boasting that no one would dare intervene, threatening that any would-be hero would face severe consequences. They continued to encircle her, drawing nearer with each loop of their motorcycles. Eventually, they started to randomly kick at her. Trapped in the center, Clara found it impossible to evade the blows without risking collision with another bike. At that moment, her fear intensified, not just for herself but for her baby too. This was the first time Clara truly feared for her life. Unlike many others, Clara had led a protected life. Her parents, though not rich, had shielded her from any potential threats, cherishing their youngest child and only daughter among 4 sons. Her brothers had always been her guardians, ensuring that everyone in the neighborhood understood that harming Clara was off limits. Clara's brothers were muscular and deeply committed to bodybuilding, making them appear quite formidable despite their genuinely kind hearts. They were extremely protective of their younger sister, ready to go to any extent to protect her. This protective shield made people think twice before troubling Clara. Those daring enough to cross her path were met with stern repercussions, allowing Clara to navigate through school relatively trouble-free. She pursued a degree in programming in college, where she excelled and was among the top graduates. Post-graduation, Clara opted to work remotely, a choice driven by her desire to avoid the daily grind and relentless traffic. Even as a capable adult, her brothers continued their vigilant protection. Now even more equipped to do so, one becoming a police officer and another a naval captain. Clara's personal life flourished when she married Doug, a military man, ensuring she was always in the company of strong men devoted to safeguarding their loved ones. Unfortunately, Clara's marriage faced challenges early on, particularly her deep-seated desire to have a child. Despite numerous medical consultations that confirmed there were no health issues with either partner, and assurances that conception was just a matter of time, Clara remained childless. Time stretched on, turning months into years, with no pregnancy in sight. Just as Clara was starting to despair, fearing she might never conceive, she discovered she was pregnant. This news filled her and Doug with immense joy, making them the happiest couple imaginable. Their friends and family, who knew of their struggles, rejoiced with them, including her brothers, who took extra care to check on her regularly to make sure she avoided any stress. Clara promptly enrolled in prenatal care at the nearest hospital and started attending sessions, with both she and Doug fully committed to ensuring the health of their unborn child, which was their top priority. Luckily, Clara was well loved in her community, having grown up there. To them, she was more than just a neighbor, and she had always felt protected amongst them. However, for the first time, she encountered hostility from strangers for no apparent reason. As she felt her anxiety rise, a group of bikers approached her menacingly, extending their legs in threatening gestures. Clara realized the danger of possibly falling and harming her baby. Determined not to succumb to fear, she raised her voice above the roar of their engines, firmly telling them to back off, declaring she wasn't afraid and would hold them accountable for any harm. But they only responded with mocking laughter, revving their engines louder to drown out her warnings. At that moment, Clara realized she was done playing games with them. They deserved a dose of her fury too. As they continued to circle around her, she swiftly took out her phone and started to dial a number. This action made the bikers halt their circling, watching her while laughing and questioning her intentions. Ignoring their taunts, she attempted to call Doug, only for them to snatch the phone away, keeping it out of her reach as they inquired about who she was trying to contact. Frustrated, she revealed that she wanted to call her husband. At this, they erupted in laughter and handed back her phone, taunting her that her husband could do nothing to protect her and that he would receive a beating himself if he showed up. They boasted that they would leave him so fearful that he wouldn't dare respond to her calls for help in the future. Clara merely grinned at their threats, realizing they had no idea who she or her family were. Deciding it was time they learned their lesson, she phoned her husband, informing him that she was being harassed by a group of bikers. She gave him her location and urged him to come quickly. also requesting that he bring her brothers, who lived nearby. Throughout her conversation with Doug, she deliberately referred to him by his military rank, General. Hearing this title repeated, the biker's laughter faded, replaced by pale, shocked expressions. Fear began to seep in as they wondered if her husband truly was a general or if it was merely a bluff to intimidate them. Doubt started to cloud some of the bikers' minds as they reassessed their actions. The last thing they desired was an encounter with the military. Yet, one of them, who appeared to be the leader, dismissed her claims. He mocked the notion that Clara could be the spouse of a general, pointing out that her pregnancy and pedestrian state under the harsh afternoon sun were unbecoming of a general's wife, who would likely be more pampered and better presented. He confidently assured the others that she was fabricating stories to intimidate them, insisting that no help was on the way for her. He was convinced she hadn't made any call, asserting she had no one to turn to, a solitary mother, alone and unsupported at home. Clara was taken aback by the leader's assertions. He fabricated details about her life, all false. Yet he seemed to fully believe his own narrative. His construed reality of her circumstances was evidently more palatable to him than the truth that she could indeed be married to a general. If only he had shared the apprehensions of his cohort, they might have fled immediately, potentially evading the impending crisis. However, his lack of wisdom, coupled with his ability to persuade his followers to remain, led them to continue their torment. They circled her on their bikes, nudging her repeatedly. Yet Clara stayed composed and silent, hardly reacting, confident that assistance was imminent. Suddenly, the atmosphere was shattered by the loud wails of sirens, slicing through the air decisively. A convoy of vehicles, marked by the distinctive camouflage of military trucks, rapidly approached the scene. The bikers looked on in disbelief as the reality of their situation dawned on them. It became clear at that moment that Clara hadn't been joking. In a frenzied rush, they gunned their engines loudly and sped off in the opposite direction, hoping to escape. Clara winced, covering her ears as the motorcycles zoomed past, the breeze from their passage brisk against her skin. Following closely, the trucks thundered after the bikers, their engines making the ground quake. Suddenly, one of the trucks halted next to her and Doug leaped out. He embraced her tightly, inquiring about her well-being. Overwhelmed with relief, Clara clung to him. He carefully escorted her to the vehicle, instructing the driver to take her home. He explained that he needed to handle the bikers first, promising they would regret encountering his wife. Meanwhile, the bikers were gripped by intense fear, speeding down the street like fugitives, with several vehicles in hot pursuit. They aimed for the street's end, planning to disperse into the maze of back alleys where the trucks couldn't follow. Just as they neared their escape route, a chorus of sirens sounded, and police cars appeared, sealing off their exit and advancing menacingly. In sheer terror, the bikers spun around, only to find their retreat blocked by the army trucks, trapped between the police and the military. Their escape routes closed in just as they had earlier with Clara. With no options left, they dismounted their bikes and knelt, hands raised in surrender. A police car door swung open, and out stepped one of Clara's brothers, who gave a satisfied nod as the bikers were detained and handcuffed. As the police began escorting the bikers away, the sense of justice was palpable. Doug requested assistance as he aimed to confront the bikers before the police could monopolize their time. Clara's brother was more than willing to help. Doug quickly handcuffed the bikers to their motorcycles and ordered them to push their bikes throughout the extensive community for several hours. By the end of this ordeal, both their legs and arms were severely sore from the excessive exertion. However, Doug's plans for them did not end there. Next, he directed them to Clara's house, where they pleaded for her forgiveness, expressing sincere regret and promising never to repeat their actions. Their remorse was a direct consequence of the harsh punishment they endured. Unfortunately for them, Clara was unmoved. The bikers had endangered both her and her unborn child, and she insisted on them receiving the harshest penalty possible. Doug agreed. And still shackled to their bikes, the bikers pushed them to the police station. They entered the jail cells as if they were checking into luxurious accommodations. So exhausted were they. Legal proceedings followed. And during the trial, additional accounts surfaced about their history of harassing others in different communities. Despite always managing to evade the authorities just in time, the bikers' luck finally deserted them when they crossed paths with Clara. For their offenses, they received prison sentences and were permanently prohibited from riding motorcycles. Additionally, they were issued a restraining order preventing any contact with Clara. Should they violate any of these conditions, they would be immediately sent back to prison. The bikers regretted their previous actions, having thought their behavior was intimidating and cool. But now they were facing lifelong consequences for their mistakes. Clara felt a sense of satisfaction with the outcome, pleased to have contributed to removing such troublemakers from the streets. She believed they received a just punishment, making her efforts all the more rewarding. Clara's courage in confronting the bikers was truly remarkable. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.